All right, today we're going to build out your essential Google Cloud Toolkit, especially if you're a DevOps pro. And look, we're skipping all the marketing fluff. We're getting right to the services you actually need to build infrastructure that's secure, scalable, and reliable. So let's jump right in. Because let's be real, your job, it's about so much more than just babysitting a CI/CD pipeline, right? You're not just pushing code from point A to point B. No, you're the one managing the entire platform that code runs on. And that means you're on the hook for everything. Its security, its ability to scale up and down, and of course, protecting all the data it touches. That's a huge responsibility. So with that in mind, we've structured this whole explainer as your essential GCP toolkit. We're going to cover the core tools for compute, networking, and data, but we're going to be looking at them through a very specific DevOps lens. We're talking security, automation, and reliability. First up in the toolkit, compute services. I mean, this is where your code actually runs. And GCP gives you this whole spectrum of options, all the way from having total control over a virtual machine to, letting Google manage pretty much everything for you. Okay, so at the very foundation, you've got Compute Engine. This is Google's infrastructure as a service, your IaaS. Basically, it just gives you raw virtual machines. But here's the thing, for a DevOps pro, the job isn't just about spinning up a VM, right? It's all about hardening it. That means you're using custom, trusted images, you're disabling access points you don't need, and this one is huge. You're getting rid of external IPs on any machine that doesn't absolutely, positively need one. Next up is GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine, which is really the heart and soul of most modern cloud-native apps. Now, for any real production environment, there are 3 things that are totally non-negotiable. First, you've got to use private clusters to protect your control plane. Second, use workload identity for secure, keyless authentication to other GCP services. And third, you have to enable autoscaling. Honestly, that's your baseline for running GKE both securely and efficiently. Now, what if you want to just forget about managing servers completely? Well, that's where serverless comes into play. Cloud Run is just fantastic for stateless containers that can scale all the way down to 0, which saves you a ton of money. App Engine is a classic for just getting a web app deployed simply. And Cloud Functions, perfect for those small, event-driven little bits of code. So how in the world do you choose? Well, this slide right here, this is your cheat sheet. If you need full operating system control, that's a job for Compute Engine. Running a bunch of containerized microservices? GKE is your powerhouse. This table really breaks it all down, even for the serverless options. It's a great framework to just keep in the back of your mind. Okay, so we've got our compute figured out. Now we have to connect it all together. And probably more importantly, we have to protect it. And that brings us to networking, which is really the invisible foundation of your entire cloud environment. The first thing to really get about GCP networking is a total game changer, especially if you're used to other clouds. As this slide shows, virtual private clouds, or VPCs, are global. A single VPC can span every single Google Cloud region on the planet. The subnets inside that VPC, though, those are regional. This is such a fundamental concept, and it unlocks some incredibly powerful architectures. So how do you control what traffic gets in or out of your VMs? Well, that's where firewall rules come in. Now, I know this slide might look a little complicated at first glance, but it really just boils down to these 6 key parts. You've got priority, direction, is it coming in or going out, the action, which is just allow or deny, the target VMs the rule applies to, the source of the traffic, and finally, the protocol and ports. But look, if you remember one thing from this slide, make it this. For priority, the lower the number, the more important the rule. A rule with priority 1000 will always beat a rule with priority 2000. That's the key. Choosing the right load balancer, it really just comes down to what you need to do. As you can see from this little table, if you need a global presence and a web application firewall, or WAF, you're going to use the global external HTTPS load balancer. Why? Because that's the one that talks to CloudArmor. But what if you need to preserve the original client IP all the way to your backend? Then you need a pass-through network load balancer. This table is your practical guide. Okay, this next one is absolutely critical for security. Just think about it for a sec. How does a VM with no public IP address download a software update or talk to a Google service like BigQuery? Well, the answer is private Google access. You just flip a switch to enable it on the subnet, and like magic, it allows your private instances to reach Google APIs over Google's own internal network without ever touching the public internet. All right, let's move on to the next section of our toolkit, data and storage. I mean, compute and networking are kind of useless if you can't securely store your application's state and protect your most valuable asset, right? Which is your information. Cloud storage isn't just one thing. It has different classes for different needs. So think of it like an object's life. When it's new and you're accessing it all the time, it lives in standard class. But as it gets older and you access it less, you can use these things called lifecycle policies to automatically move it to cheaper, colder storage tiers. You end up saving money without even lifting a finger. And your database toolkit is just as diverse. Cloud SQL is your go-to for managed relational databases. Your MySQL, your Postgres. If you need that same relational power but at a global, just mind-bending scale, that's where Spanner comes in. For analyzing huge data sets, especially logs, you'll be using the BigQuery data warehouse. And to kind of glue it all together with asynchronous events, you've got PubSub. Okay, we've now reached the final, and maybe the most critical part of our toolkit, mastering data security. So let's talk about the advanced controls you really need to protect your data from some nasty threats, like unauthorized access and data exfiltration. The single most important thing to know is this: all data in Google Cloud is encrypted at rest by default. Period. Full stop. But for compliance reasons, you often need more control. And as this table shows, if you need to manage your own keys inside GCP, you use Cloud CAMS for what's called Customer Managed Encryption Keys, or CMEK. And if those keys can never leave your own on-prem hardware, then you use Cloud ECAM, the external key manager. This is the question that really should keep every security and DevOps engineer up at night. Seriously, how do you stop a legitimate, but maybe compromised, account from copying all of your sensitive data out of a BigQuery table and into some public cloud storage bucket? Well, the answer is VPC service controls. It lets you draw this virtual service perimeter around your most critical projects. And once that perimeter is active, data simply cannot leave. So that attempt to copy data from BigQuery to a public bucket, it just gets blocked, right at the API level. This is your ultimate defense against data exfiltration. Okay, that was a lot, I know. So let's lock in the most important takeaways. First thing, just like this slide says, never ever forget this fundamental difference. In GCP, VPCs are global, but the subnets inside of them are regional. Second, burn this architectural pattern into your brain. Private VMs with 0 external IPs, using Cloud NAT for outbound internet access only when you need it, and private Google access to talk securely to Google services. That is a core pattern for secure infrastructure. And finally, remember this really critical security detail here on the slide. If you need a web application firewall or DDoS protection, you must use the global external HTTPS load balancer. It's the only one that integrates with Cloud Armor. So there you have it, a super high-speed tour of your core, secure DevOps toolkit on Google Cloud. Your toolkit is ready. The only question left is, what are you going to build with it?
We hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe for more Apex insights.